Hello everyone and welcome to a Azure Spring Clean session 2025. I'm going to be your presenter and host here, Elhan Yusubov, and we are going to focus more toward learning more about governance and how to use that with Azure Bicep. Namely, we are going to look into Azure policies and governance controls that you can use in your Azure environment. We'll have demos, but before doing that, we'll have introduction into very express introduction to Azure Bicep. All right, so without any overdue, let's start this session. But before starting our session, I want to say big thank you for the organizers of this event, Azure Spring Clean. It's organized successfully year by year, and I'm happy to be in this event to share skills with other great presenters. So please check Azure Spring Clean website for all other demos. In addition to that, if you can check the Tuesday sessions, you would also find a session that I joined forces with Kasun, another Microsoft MVP, and we created all the trends that you need to know about AKS and how to create your observability when you are using the AKS and understand the trends there. So please check that session as well. Okay, without any overdue, let's let's get a quite a quick introduction about uh, myself. So probably you know me. My name is Elhan. Again, I'm very honored to be one of the Microsoft MVPs awarded by Microsoft. I'm also Microsoft certified community lead. So if you are also providing training on Microsoft material and you have any questions or any feedback, I'm here to listen and get your feedback to the MCT program. I'm also founder of the Cloud Marathoner community, and uh, I've been, you know, mm, and I'm here basically to help everybody to get their cloud journey started. The whole idea about this Cloud Marathoner initiative is to create a blog and post about the cloud learning challenges and as well as help the people to start their cloud journey. And you may find those posts on LinkedIn and other places. So if you want to join Cloud Marathon community, you are more than welcome to do that. Please, to do that, actually, I would say that please visit my LinkedIn page that I'm sharing here. Get connected with me, give a follow, and then be part of this great Cloud Marathoner community. Uh, and I post mainly about infrastructure as a code on Azure and as well as the architecture tip and about Azure architecture design tips and tricks that you may find very useful if you are doing real world development or you are trying to help your customers. In addition to that, I tweet about that on the X platform. So if you are there, please also let's get connected here. This is the Cloud Marathoner blog post that I'm running, and you may check here some of the sessions that I have created or I have been involved in moderating that as part of the core team here at Cloud Lunch and Learn. So I hope you are familiar with that. If not, please check this and get notified about that. Um, Okay, I think that's enough about this. We are going to come back to this, but it's kind of small overview. Please, again, get connected with me on a LinkedIn. Let me know if you have any questions. This is a small slide about the company where I'm involved. It is T-Rex Solutions, located here in East Coast, US. And we are a mid-sized company that are focused to provide mission critical services to our customers. We have good, strong relationship with cloud solution providers, and we have been in this area for the last 25 years. So if you are looking to start a new opportunity, or you are looking to change certain things, and you are in the market, please, reach back to me. I'll be happy to see if you have any suitable position that you might be interested. So keep that in mind. Again, Terex Solution is a great company. I've been there for the last 5 years, helping our customers, and we have very good people in this company. And if you are again in the market, let me know. All right, that said, let's uh, without any overdue, let's see what we are going to cover today. First, as I mentioned in the beginning, I kind of teased everybody. We'll start with express introduction into Azure Bicep and Policy. After that, we are going to look more in detail what does what Azure Policy is, what are the main parts it consists of, what is the Azure definition, what's the Azure initiative, what is the Azure assignment, Azure Policy assignment or definition. So you need to get familiar with those components of Azure Policy. It might be a little bit confusing in the beginning, but once you get to this intro level information, you would feel much more comfortable. Then we are going to look into policy lifecycle management, where you assign the policy definition, or how you can combine the policies into a policy initiative. So we'll look into that. Then we'll look into some best practices while we are working with the Azure Policy using the Bicep language, Bicep code, and we'll have a couple of demos about Azure Bicep and as well as the Azure Policy, how to create Azure initiative, how to assign them, and just how to version control them and what's the purpose there, right? So what value you are going to get out of it. Okay, I hope that sounds good for everyone. So let's look at what is actually the Azure Bicep is. Again, the so Azure Bicep is a new domain specific language, meaning that you can use this infrastructure as a code language on Azure environment only, and it is dedicated to solve one and only one type of problem, which is which is defining the Azure cloud resources, and then their configuration, and then it also helps you to define those code and so that you can deploy those configurations into environment. Again, even though we call it Bicep Azure Bicep language, it is not a programming language. Okay, so you cannot actually go and write down an application with that or program an applications that you would usually do with programming languages like C# or Python or any other language there. So next thing here is the beauty of Azure Bicep is that it simplifies the authoring and managing of Azure resources that we mentioned. It is a transparent abstraction over ARM, which stands for Azure Resource Manager Templates. So if you in the past used the ARM templates or in Microsoft Learn documentation you use the ARM templates, Azure Bicep is more simplified, cleaner way to define those Azure Cloud resources for you. And this is the modern way to deal with infrastructure as a code in Azure environment. Again, Azure Bicep is infrastructure as a code way dealing in Microsoft Azure environments. So, okay, we define Azure Bicep so you know what it is, but where it belongs. So how Azure Bicep interacts with Azure environment, specifically with Azure Resource Manager layer, and how other type of infrastructure as a code languages are interacting with it. It would be nice to look at the diagram. So the next slide here is showing the diagram. And in this diagram, as you see, we define here Azure Policy. Let me see here. Okay, so we have Azure Bicep file that you will look just, in the next few minutes, you are going to see how this Azure Bicep file actually looks like. So once you have your Azure Bicep code, which basically defines your Azure Cloud resources, it's going to, whenever it's basically submitted to Azure Resource Manager in order to get provisioned, it goes through this Azure Resource Manager layer where authentication, authorization happen, and as well as the validation of the resources, and then it get applied to the through resource providers. All those Azure resource configurations and the resource itself get either created or modified based on your configuration settings. Same thing actually done with other infrastructure as a code tools. Maybe you are familiar with Pulumi or you are familiar with Terraform. So those infrastructure as a code languages are also doing the similar work, but they are third party. They have some advantages, of course, but they're also, when you compare them with Bicep, they also have disadvantages. So all of them, again, have to go to Azure Resource Manager in order to be able to go and create or modify Azure resource in your environment. That said, let's look at some benefits if you decide to go with Azure Bicep and look at some, sample Azure Bicep files so you can get more familiar. As you see, there's more than 10 reasons to use, understand, and learn Azure Bicep. They are listed here. I'm not going to repeat what you see on the slides, but I would add into that it is really the power of Azure Bicep comes from the integration with Azure, uh, Microsoft Azure environment, and plus the Visual Studio Code, which is a free IDE, right? This is free development tool that most of the cloud engineers and overall IT people know where it is. It's free to use. It's one of the best tools there in the market. If you never used Visual Studio Code, I definitely advise you to look into that. Visual Studio Code is an awesome tool, and the first class integration of Azure Bicep into that through Bicep extension makes it invaluable. Just, I don't know if I would be that much, you know, uh, I don't think a newcomers into the infrastructure as a code with Bicep would be that much successful if we were missing this Visual Studio Code editor. So make sure that you have that one. Okay, that said, let's look at an example, right? So how this Azure Bicep looks like, why it is simplified way, and it is much easier to deal than ARM templates, which is the traditional way how resources are defined and configured in Azure, Microsoft Azure environment. So let me bring the Visual Studio Code here. Okay, I hope everybody is able to see this repo. Before starting with this repo, I want to make sure that you know where is this repo and how you can use that. So this repo is called Learn Bicep repo. And if you go and navigate to this GitHub, let me bring that. So if you go and navigate to this GitHub repo, this is um, so this is my landing page where I have my GitHub repo. So let me make it bigger so you can easily go and navigate into that. All right. So once you're in that GitHub repo, please scroll down and you should be able to see Learn Bicep here. So all the code that I'm going to show you are already located in this GitHub repo. Please check it out. It has a lot of samples. I'm trying to restructure it a little bit for the next couple of weeks. So it has more clear instructions for each sample, how it's implemented, what scripts you need to run. So I'm still working on it. So be patient with that. If it is confusing, some cleanup is going to happen there. But all the code that I will show you today, Bicep code, as well as the Azure Policy definitions and Azure Policy deployments, they are all going to come from this GitHub repo. And if you are on this GitHub repo, please fork it, use it, let me know what you have. In addition to that, later today, I'm going in my slides as a reference resource to learn about Azure Bicep and all these great innovations that are happening there. I also invite you to visit the awesome Azure Bicep GitHub repo because it has a number of great resources for you to get started learning the Azure Bicep. Okay, and if you want a video type of lessons, I also have a resource, but it's going to come. So be patient. It's coming, and you will get that resource as well. You will get to know which type of videos can help you to upskill with Azure Bicep. Okay, that's it. I'm going to go to this Learn Bicep GitHub repo. This is the same GitHub repo that you would be seeing today. And all the code, for example, you would see that I'm going to talk about sample number 24, which defines the, here it is, sample number. Oh, it's not here. So I have this sample number 24 that I didn't make commit yet, which is under the samples here, 24. So right after this, recording, uh, after this session, I'm going to make sure that the latest information is committed into that, but you should be able to see all that code under the Learn Bicep. Okay. All right. That said, let's come back to the demo of Azure Bicep. So here, I'm going to, let me go back in Learn Bicep. If you navigate to the modules, there's a number of modules here, and one of them is App Service. So I'm going to show that one. I will switch into Visual Studio Code so it's easier for everyone to see and experience that. So I'm going to switch back here to my Visual Studio Code. And here I'm going to navigate to the modules, and I'm going to open App Services. So what it is, right? In the beginning, if you don't know Azure Bicep and infrastructure as a code, it may seem a little bit overwhelming, but don't go anywhere. Before I start talking about this Bicep code, I want to mention that as you see here, I have this Azure Bicep extension code is this specific icon of Bicep. So that means that I already have Bicep extension installed on my Visual Studio Code and it is enabled. If you want to do that, you just need to go to the extensions here, click on them, and you need to type Bicep. And if this Bicep extension is not installed, please go and install that one. And then you'll be able to get all the great tooling and autocomplete. There's a lot of great thing that's coming with that, and you may learn more about IntelliSense, all great stuff that Bicep extension brings to help you to manage your Azure cloud resources. So I'm going to close it for now, and yeah, so go back to the code. So here, in terms of sample code, as I mentioned, we are going to go to these modules and click on App Services. So what is App Service here? App Services basically defines components that you need to have in order to deploy your Azure Web App Service, which can host your website that can run there. For any Azure Web App Service, if you are familiar with Azure, you know that it consists of two components, right? It needs to have this Azure Application Service Plan, which is basically a hardware where your web app is running, and as well as the web app itself, which may also have deployment slots. It may have many functionalities that help you to host and run your web application in a managed service. So here, when we define the resource, as you see, we have parameters. You can define descriptions. In descriptions, you can define the name of each resource, and then the resource itself, which is basically your, which is basically a cloud resource. Each of them get defined with this resource keyword here, okay? And then, of course, this is the name, and then you define the provider name. Is it the Microsoft Web or is it the storage account? And then you define here fully the provider name, and finally you define the whatever the API version you want to use. In this case, I'm still using, for this example, API version 2020, but there is much newer versions as well. To see that, you can just go there, and for example, you can go and again recreate, and you will see that there are much newer versions of that you can incorporate in your code. So in my case, I'm not going to change it, but you are more than welcome to try other API versions. And then you can naturally ask why I should change this API version, right? So for all the resources in Microsoft Azure, they all come with their API versions, and depending on which version you use, you get certain features enabled for that resource. So if there's a specific feature of the resource that you need to provision, then make sure that you are using the appropriate API version and you are not using an older API version that doesn't have that feature. or that configuration that you can use. So that's very important. Please keep that in mind. So anyway, so in this sample that you see here, we have application service plan, and then we have the app itself, which is the site that's running inside that Azure Web App Plan. And as you see here, it needs, for any site that's running, it needs to have a connection to the application service plan ID so that it knows which application service plan it is running to. So again, I don't want to make it very big, but here it's very concise code that you see here that's running. So if you wanna, if you are totally new to Azure Bicep and you want to understand a Bicep code, you can always come to this right side here on the IDE and click on this icon. This is the icon that's called Azure Bicep Visualizer. So if you click on that, we have this great feature where whatever the service you see here, definition of two services, as I mentioned before, they're going to be nicely visualized on the right side. So if you have dozens of resources that you are planning to deploy and they are defined in one Bicep code, you can see them here. So that said, this is the Bicep code, and it basically have 33 lines here, even though if we check and remove the all these comments and as well as spaces, it's going to be less than 30. But anyway, so this is how we define application service plan, and as well as the site that's using the application service plan. If you would use a traditional way to define this in ARM template, then it's very easy to convert that. To do that, what you need to do is, I'm going to open the command line here. You need to run a build command. That's one way to do that. There's easier way to just right click and say build ARM template. It's going to do the same thing. So I'm just going to show you how to do that from the command line so that you know that there's a multiple ways how you can run the same command. So to build that ARM template, or traditional way of showing how a Azure application service plan and as well as this website are defined and configured, you need to type following code. First of all, we are going to use the Azure CLI. That's a command line tool. And you want to make sure that you install the Bicep extensions there. If you didn't use that before, I would say just type AZ Bicep. Okay. And if you type AZ Bicep and, for example, if you want to type the version, you can always say, let me try it again, AZ Bicep version. So if you don't have basically Azure CLI or Azure Bicep installed, you would not get this one. I would just strongly advise go and install that. If you don't know how to do that, then of course you have a helper here. What you need to do is basically just come to my repo, and in this repo, if you navigate to the Azure, awesome Azure Bicep, which is the very popular, and then just click on Azure CLI command, then you would get all the instructions how to install that Azure CLI, how to enable the Bicep on it. So just check this one. It will help you how to install the Azure CLI and get up and running with Bicep. Okay, so that's it. Here I'm going to do the I'm going to take this Bicep file, which is our app service.bicep file, and use command line to create ARM JSON representation of it. So I'm going to basically compile that file into ARM template. And before doing that, I want to mention that what we should expect here is we are going to get the app service.json file, which is going to be the JSON representation of this Bicep code. So to do that, again, we need to run the command az bicep, and then we are going to build that. And then, of course, we need to define the folder where it is located. In our case, it's located under the modules, app services. So we need to define it. So let's do that. So if I tap MO and press on tab, it's going to complete here to modules. And then I just need to type app service and then press on tab, it's going to pick up this file name for me and just enter. So once we press on enter, behind the scene, what's going to happen is this Visual Studio Code is going to grab this Bicep file, compile that into ARM template, and create app services.json file. So here I'm going to minimize this command line. As you see, we get app service JSON file. And if I go and basically, let me take this out. So if we split them together, let me split this screen here, split to the right. So here I have the app service plan representation, and on the next one here, so app service plan, let me go here. So let me actually split the other one. So we have this JSON file here for app service plan. I'm going to split to the right. Okay, so what we got here is I have representation of JSON file on the right side and how it looks in ARM template. First of all, you will see that it's much cleaner to look at that in Bicep code. It is less than, again, 30 lines of code if you remove empty spaces. With ARM JSON representation, which is ARM template, it is twice of the size. So you have to maintain more lines of code here. Secondly, here, whenever you would see that here metadata is created for this ARM template. It defines the parameters that we have here: location, app service, app name, app service plan name. They are all defined here in under the parameters, location, you see them here. And then we define the resources here. And under the resources, you will see that it defines the server farm, which is the first resource here, and then it defines the website here, and then it defines the output parameters. But as you see here, when we compare, for example, this website declaration with the one here, they actually look similar, but there is less code involved and it's much cleaner when you use the Bicep file. So that's the biggest difference here. I hope that would convince you to learn Azure Bicep. So let me close this now. And next, what we are going to do here is, so we saw how it is easy to get started with Bicep code. It's less number of codes. There's a usability through modularization, and there's a lot of good stuff. I'm going to share the resources that you can learn more about that. But now we want to focus more toward the next piece of it, which is the Azure Policy. Before going there, I want to again mention the awesome Azure Bicep repo. Please go there, check the resources. I'm pretty sure you will like it. And if you want to add any resources there, it's open to the community. It's managed by community. Please create your PR, your pull request. It's going to be verified, reviewed, and accepted as any other PRs that have been, put in there. Okay. Regarding video courses, these are the Azure Bicep course on LinkedIn. You have Azure Bicep First Look course here. You have Azure Bicep Part 1, and you have Azure Bicep Part 2. So if you are using the LinkedIn, you are more than welcome to go and check these video lessons as well. But now, once we learn about the Azure Bicep, now let's look what is the policy, Azure Policy, because all this compliance and governance is driven by Azure policies, where we use the code to manage, deploy them, and enforce them in our Azure environment. So to look into that, first let's understand what's the Azure Policy. The Azure Policy is a service in Microsoft Azure that helps you to manage and enforce organizational standards and compliance at scale. I know, when we talk about governance, compliance, it may sound boring, but when you are dealing with that in a regulated environment for your customers, then it's very important necessity that you need to make sure you know how to manage that. So basically, policy is used to enforce a rule or policy. To give you an example, let's say your customers or all your resources should run only in, for example, they should run only in East US region. In order to make sure that you are compliant with that policy, with that rule, you need to create the policy. And policy, what what is the components of the Azure policy, how it looks like. I'm going to show you the example, but first let's see what's the Azure policy. So first, it's about creating the rules that automatically followed, right? It can audit, it can deny creation, and it can basically make sure that your environment is compliant. Again, with Azure Policy, you bring compliance to the corporate standards that your project or your organization needs to follow. It also helps to make sure that any service level agreements that you have with your compliance and regulations, they are all intact and they are followed. And finally, it brings this great thing about having this consistency, security, and compliance across all Azure environments. In other words, it allows you to create, assign, and manage policies that enforce rules and effects over your resources, ensuring they are all comply again with those specific standards and service level agreements that your project needs to comply. And if you want an example, let's think about a very simple example that you can use Azure Policy that can ensure that all your resources are tagged properly, or you want to restrict types of the virtual machines that can be deployed in your environment. In order to help with that, to maintain them consistently with the security and compliance, you want to use Azure policies so it can be maintained, uniformly across any Azure environment where it needs to be applied. That said, again, with Azure policy, when you create the Azure policy itself as an Azure policy file is a JSON file. It has a structure, and Bicep language basically helps you to manage that efficiently. So let's look at the small example how this Azure policy looks like. So here in the same repo, if you go and navigate into the file called under the tagging policies, I have this deny storage accounts not using only HTTPS JSON file. And what it does is basically it denies storage account creation or modification that not using the only HTTPS protocol. And to do that, as you see, when we define the Azure policy, it's a JSON file, and it has a parameters, it has policy rules. This is the main parts about that. And it also comes with version control. So in parameters, it defines the effect. Do you want to deny when certain conditions met, or you want to disable this policy? So that's defined in your parameters with effect metadata that it displays. In terms of rules, it's all about defining what condition will trigger your policy. In our case here, it says that for all the conditions, as we see here, where we are dealing with storage account type of resource, and where we have the storage account that doesn't have, so not equals true, it doesn't have this supports HTTPS traffic only field, then it's going to be enforced, meaning that it's going to enforce the specific effect. It's going to deny, this is the default value, it's going to deny creation of that. And of course, you can also disable the policy, which is going to disable that enforcement, which is, in some cases you want to do that. You can also have exceptions, of course, when you are applying the policies, but generally speaking, this policy will help you to deny storage accounts that are not using only HTTPS, only the HTTPS, traffic. All right. So this is how policy looks like. That said, I'm going to switch back to the slides here, and then let's look at that from a more holistic perspective. So Azure Bicep is infrastructure as a code tool where you can define components of policy, where you can package them and then deploy into your Azure environment. So how it happens is First of all, for deploying any Azure policy or managing them, you want to make sure that first you have, and this is very important, you want to make sure that first and foremost, oops, let me make sure. Okay. Let me go back here. So first you want to make sure that, let me go back here just a second. I lose. Okay, first you want to make sure that your policy definition is defined. So your policy definition is there. It's a JSON file. Second, you want to make sure that you have a policy assignment, which is going to take your policy definition and create an assignment for that policy to be, assigned and ready in your Azure policy, in your Azure environment. And again, when we talk about policies, they do get usually applied uh, on a subscription level, but you can also apply them on a higher level like management groups. Okay, so it really depends what's the scope where you want to apply. As you know, in Azure, you have different scopes. You have resource group scope, you have Azure subscription, you have management groups. It can be applied to any of those scopes. And then you can define all these pieces within the main Bicep or within the Bicep file where you want to keep them as all in one package so that this Bicep file can get version control and plus deployed with all the required components to make sure that your Azure policy is captured as a code and it is there. So before going even further here, I want to mention that there are a number of built-in policies, and I want to walk you through that so you are aware about that. So let me know, this is not that file. Let me go back here. So here basically we have Azure Policy built-in definitions, which you can look into the samples, right, to get started. Sometimes it's not that easy to get started, and it's very important to know what you can use. And here, if you scroll, let's look at, for example, a Azure container here. So under containers registry here, you would see that there's a number of policies defined here. And this policy here, for example, let me go here. No, not this one. No, not this. So for example, here, just I'm going to share actually this URL so you have an access. So this is the URL where I went. And in container registry here, if I make it bigger, you would set it says that this container registry policy is going to disable any anonymous authentication, and that can be your corporate policy for this resource, which is very important, policy. To do that, or how to do that, you can always go and look into this policy, and when you open that, you will see that it's going to show you a JSON representation of that policy. It has a parameter here. As you see, there's effect parameter. You can modify or disable this policy. In terms of defining this policy, as you can see, it defines the name that you saw there. It's a built-in policy. It's not custom. All the custom policies that you create, you want to make sure they are custom because you put there some business logic that you want to have for your specific implementation. And then, once you define it, you define the version, again, parameters that define the effect. Is it modified, disabled? Do you want to audit? That's another effect that you may have. And then policy rule, right? The policy rule defines what's the condition when it's going to get applied. For example, for this container registry policy, we see that it says it should apply only to the container registries where you have a field anonymous pool enabled equal true, meaning whenever it is met this condition, then certain policy is going to apply it. And this policy that's getting applied is described here. as you see, it looks at the effect. Is it deny, disable, what needs to be enforced? It's going to find that role definition ID of this policy building, and it's going to, because we have modified it, it's going to add or replace that uh, specific field where it's going to make it false, meaning that uh, it's going to disable any anonymous pools from that Azure Container Registry, meaning that everything needs to be authenticated, or authentication needs to happen before pulling anything from that container registry. And then, of course, you have ID and type of this policy. Okay, I think it might be a little bit not. This is just kind of intro into that, but it would make a lot more sense when we look into the demo. So let's look into demo where we are going to define Azure Policy Initiative, which is going to be the basically a set of Azure policies. And once we package them into Azure Initiative, which is a set of Azure policies, we are going to look into what's going to enforce. We are going to pick up those Azure policies from built-in policies that are available in Azure. And currently, if you look, there's probably around 3,000 Azure policy definitions, meaning there's more than enough. And I showed you the resource. You can always go and look for any samples there before crafting your own custom Azure policy definition. Then we'll look into definition policies, how it needs to be defined with Bicep. We'll look into policy initiative, how it is defined, and then you will look into resource governance in action, meaning that we are going to take this policy, will push the entire environment. So let's switch here gears into the Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to open this Azure Bicep file. This Azure Bicep file is actually located under the samples. You just go to this 24-deploy policy as code with initiative. So this is the one that we are going to look. And as I mentioned, the scope of this policy is the Azure subscription. That's why we have it here. But you can also apply that into resource group, or you can apply that into higher scope, which could be your management group, where your policies are, assigned to. They're under that management group. You can also assign that to the root management group, depends which level of management group you want to assign your policy. Anyway, so before going through that, let me explain what this Azure Bicep file supposed to be doing. So it defines parameters by policy source, where it's coming, type or category of this policy, which is a custom, and it has default enforcement mode, which is usually you are going to see what it is. Then we have list of allowed locations. These are the Azure regions where I want my resources only be able to be provisioned there. If anyone tries to provision, for example, a Azure cloud resource in a different region, let's say in Northern Europe, it should fail. Then I define list of all allowed virtual machine SKUs that I want users of that Azure subscription be able to provision. I don't want to allow anything different than these specific ones because my corporate policy dictates that. And then, of course, you define the name of your policy. In my case, we define initiative name, which I call Spring Clean Demo Initiative. And again, think about initiative as a collection of, Azure definitions, Azure Policy definitions that you want to combine as one initiative. And then that initiative is going to be created and then used in order to be able to assign that into specific scope where you want to enforce that, okay? So that's why you have initiative name, then you have assignment name, we have the version here, then we define our demo initiative. So our demo initiative here is defined as part of this policy definitions, right? So in these policy definitions, we define that initiative name and the policy source for that, version, category, and after that, we have parameters, list of list of all allowed locations, a list of so basically here we define those parameters that we already spoke about, and then it comes to the policy definitions themselves, right? So here we are using existing policy definitions from Azure Policy. For example, here you see I have this allowed, locations for resource groups, and for this policy definition I put the parameter here, which is customly defined in my Azure Bicep code. But the main definition of this uh, allowed location for resource groups is coming from this policy definition, which is an existing definition, right? And it has this GUID number. Of course, I don't remember by heart what this GUID number should be, but if I would switch back to the Azure policies on Azure portal, you should be able to find it by name. So let's look at our Azure portal. So I'm going to switch to Azure portal. So here in Azure portal, these are the resource groups where I am, and here in if I go and click on definitions in the policy, so I'm in Azure policy section already. I'm going to click on definitions, and here I want to type this location here in the box because I want to find what's the Azure policy definition ID for that specific. Uh, so let me make sure that. Let me refresh this. And then here, so I want to find location. So here we have allowed location for resource group. That's the one that I have used. So if you go to this, it will define that, hey, you can use only these allowed locations within the resource group. When you are provisioning the, resource groups, it needs to come from this list. Otherwise, it's just going to deny creation of the resource group in your subscription. And to do that, as you see, there's a definition ID, which is the ID of this policy. And if you look at this definition ID, this is the basic copy of it. You would see that it starts with E765 and it ends with AF988. Okay, uh, that's the one that we see here. And if you see, it's E569 and it ends with no, not this one. Want to go to allowed locations, which one located here? It's a E765 and ends with AF988. So basically, you want to grab that definition that says allowed use location for resource groups, okay, and you put it here. So another definition is allowed Azure regions for resources. This one again is allowed location for resources. I grab this one, and I have a third definition which defines allowed virtual machine SKU sizes. Okay, so I have this, and again, I got these policy definition IDs from existing built-in definitions, but I combine them into a custom initiative because I want to make sure that these rules are enforced on my Azure subscription. Okay, that said, once we have it there, now we need to create assignment. So you first define that your initiative, which basically has a list of policies that you need to incorporate into that. Then assignment is going to take your initiative and assign to the specific Azure subscription or scope, wherever you want to enforce that. And that's what it does here. So it has a name that's parameterized. It goes through each in the description, it defines the assignment name and policy source, and then it defines the enforcement mode. In our case, again, enforcement mode is a parameter that defines on the top. We define the source and version of this assignment, and then we define the initiative ID for policy definition ID, and then we define the parameters themselves to be applied in our assignment. And we are going to look into that. And then as an output of this deployment, we have initiative ID and assignment ID coming from those two resources. So again, what we should expect here, if we go and take this Azure Bicep file that defines the initiative and then it defines the assignment, it should it should create three policy definitions that are defined here. This is the meaning, and then uh, it should take them and create a assignment in our Azure file. So to do that, there are steps that you can follow. To do that, what you need, you can go and look into scripts. Under the scripts, I have this sample 24-24-scripts Azure CLI. And what it is basically, if you want to go and look how the build command into ARM template looks like, it's there. And then if you never used Azure CLI before, because you need to authenticate to your subscription, I would definitely advise to go and use this command. In my case, I'm already authenticated, so I'm going to run this command to see that I'm in the correct subscription. In my case, it is the subscription 07. Then, if you want to be, extra cautious so that it's not coming from the cache, you can go and list all your resource groups inside that subscription. Let me run this. So I see that this subscription should exist, which is correct. This is just sanity check before doing any deployment. And then we want to deploy our policy to Azure subscription. Again, this is the same file that we just had a look. You need to find the place where this file is within your GitHub repo, and then which location you want to use. It needs to have, so in my case, it's US2, where I'm going to deploy this Azure policy, which should come with definition. And again, the name of definition is going to be the name of the initiative is going to be the Spring Clean Demo Initiative, and the name of assignment is going to be the Spring Clean Demo Assignment. So let's do that. Let me go back to the Azure CLI script. Before running this, I want to show what I have in my Azure environment. So if I go back to policy definitions, I scoped into the same subscription that I just showed you. Now this is the subscription 007. And then if I go to my assignments, I have very few assignments here, as you see. So I have in total 5 assignments with one initiative only. The rest of them are just Azure policy definitions. So let's run our script. There should be some change here. In terms of compliance, if I click on compliance here, see that, I'm at 70% at the moment. So I have compliant and some non-compliant policies at the moment. Okay, without any overdue, let's click on assignment. So we have only 5, refresh it. It's 5 only here. We are going to run this command to deploy our custom policy initiative and as well as assignment that should appear there. So I'm going to right click here, and without, I don't want to fat finger that. So that execution should start. So it started. I don't know if it's visible to you or not. So these yellow things that you see, it's basically coming from my Bicep config JSON. It is located here in this repo. And what you would find here is that this is basically rules that are applied as part of the linting capabilities. So if you don't know what's Azure Bicep linting, how to deal with that, please go and check the Azure Bicep videos on the YouTube channel from where you are going to watch this one. I hope it's going to be very valuable for you to find it. So as I see, it's actually deployment is finished here. So if as the deployment is done, let's switch back to our Azure portal and see what get provisioned there. So I'm going to switch back here to Azure portal. So in Azure portal, let's make it bigger. We had 5 assignments only. I'm going to refresh this. And now we have 6. So this is the Spring Clean demo assignment. And if you remember, when we talk about assignment, we mentioned that assignments are actually done if you have the initiative, right? So you need to have initiative, and then assignment get created based on that policy initiative. So if you click on this assignment, you would see that it defines here the parameters, but and this is the assignment, but and the parameters that belongs to that. If you go back to policy assignments here, again, we see Spring Clean demo assignment. If you want to see the actual initiative, which can be reapplied or changed later on, you can come here and then in definition all types, you see if you just click initiative here and plus as a type, if you just select the custom, you would see that I have two initiatives. So I have the Spring Clean demo initiative and I have a tag governance. But between these two initiatives that you see here, in my assignments, I only applied and used the Spring Clean one. So that's why I see it here. If I would like to bring other initiatives, I need to go back to the initiative. For example, let's say this tag governance, and then I need to assign this initiative by using this button here. Then it will come and get applied to the scope where you are trying to, enforce those policies. Okay, so that's how it is working. So I'm going to go back to the assignments. So as we see here now, I have the Spring Clean demo assignment. If you look into that, we should be able to see that, it has parameters. But what about those definitions, right? The policy definitions or rules that are going to be part of it. If you want to see that, you can go and click on View Initiative here. This is how they are connected. If you click on View Initiative, you would see those three, uh, Azure definitions that were part of the um, initiative that was created. It's about allowed location for resource groups, allowed locations for your, uh, that could be used for your resource group creation, and allowed virtual machine size queues. So you can also change these reference IDs, but I'm not going to dive into that. You see that they are built-in, they are coming from built-in definitions, and they are all have the deny effect, meaning that they are going to deny if they are not compliant with that. And to see that in action, before jumping there, I want to click again on policy assignments here, and then let's click on the Spring Clean demo assignment. And then we can click on compliance to see, my new initiative, are they compliant or not? And I see that yes, all the resources that I have, they are compliant, and there are total certain number of resources in my demo environment. So if I go back to policy assignments again, and here click on compliance part to see overall compliance for my given scope, which is my subscription 07, you would see that this is the compliance, and again the newly created uh, initiative is actually compliant, meaning that everything is okay. But let's see how it's going to actually uh, behave. To see the behavior, I'm going to switch back to the resource group here, and then in my resource groups I will come to the one of those available resource groups, and I'm going to say, okay, create a new resource. To make it easy so that we see the effect right away, I'm going to try to provision a sample storage account, but I'm going to try to make sure that my Azure policies are going to be denying my creation. So let's say I'm an employee who just joined the company and I don't know about these policies. I go and I click on create storage account, because I have a eligible account and role to do that, like I have a contributor role. And then once I'm there, I type the storage account name, test Azure Spring Clean 2025, for example. And of course, you will get this red line because whenever you deal with storage account names, as you know, you need to make sure that there is no that it's a special way how you need to define it. Only the small letters with up to 24 characters are accepted. So you can't have capital letters here. Even like if I go and capitalize some of them, I'm going to get error. Yeah, that's how it works. Okay, so the Azure Spring Clean STG 2025, that's the name. So everything looks good here because I have one of these allowed locations, which is one of the US locations. Let's say I'm going to say, okay, now for this deployment, I need to deploy that into, let's say, Europe, North Europe, right? That's the one that I mentioned. So once I select a location which is not as part of these parameters, as you see, I'm getting this error. So Europe, North Europe, and it says that this policy is actually details deny this. So there's some issue. And I can click on policy definition. And then when I look at that, I said, okay, these are the parameters that I need to be compliant with. Okay, you can click on it and look into more details into that. But if I want to see what are those exact parameters, I can also go to the uh, view initiative and then look into the each definition to know that, as I showed previously. So here, just to show this the initiative, and for each initiative, let's allow locations for resource groups. If I go there, I see the parameter, say this the array, and here's the definition of it. I can get more information about that. So as we saw, and this is the version that we defined. We defined the custom. It's here. It defines the description, where it belongs from, where it's coming. All this information is readily available here, again, with the parameters that are part of this initiative. Okay, that said, uh, you know, we succeeded in deployment our policy, and it was in action preventing certain things from happening. Of course, you can expand that and have even more robust policies in your environment using the Azure Policy to manage them and defining your um, Azure Policy. You can use Azure Bicep to define them and manage them, but Azure Policy structure needs to be followed. Okay. Okay, so what we covered today, just to go through the quick summary here, we started with Express intro. We started with Express intro into Azure Bicep and policies, and then we looked into building Azure policies, how it is defined, what are the components. We look into some lifecycle management and components of that Azure policy. Then we looked into some best practices, how to manage that using the Azure Bicep code. And we looked into a couple of demos that were part of it. I hope you find this session useful. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments and I'll be more than glad to help you. You can also directly reach to me either on the LinkedIn platform or on X or Twitter X platform, whichever is your preference. So okay, so what's next, right? What you can do in order to learn more about that and get up to date. These are the QCR codes. This is about Bicep project. This is about Azure Bicep first look video. This is the part 1, and then there's a part 2. For the Learn Bicep project, this is where you will get your code. I'm going to commit that after this session. Bicep project is overall to get to know what's happening in a Bicep project. And of course, if you need more learning resources, I definitely recommend to go and check the awesome Bicep GitHub and make sure that you fork it, you use it, and please contribute into those repos that you find helpful and you want to help the rest of and you want to help other people also to learn and succeed. All right, that's it. uh, I went a little bit over allocated time, but I hope it was very interesting for you. Thank you for watching till the end. I'm Elhan Yusubov, and I'm here to help you to learn and conquer Azure using the tools, and automation that you have in hand. Again, thank you for organizers. Thank you for viewers. Have a great day, and please check the rest of these sessions of Azure Spring Clean by going and looking the Azure Spring Clean 2025 website. Have a great day. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.